First, the fossil fuel industry. Gaius Publius, it's a pseudonym, but he writes under this name, fellow from the Pacific Northwest. He's been on our show a few times. Writes at downwithtyranny.blogspot.com, which I think is his blog. And on the beginning of this last week here, he published a piece titled "The Dying Fossil Fuel Industry." And what I find fascinating about this is he starts out with a chart, a graphic, of a classic economic bubble, where the bubble starts off, it slowly ramps up over a fairly long period of time, and people are going, wow, look at that, the prices are going up and up, the stock market's going up and up, or the price of tulips is going up and up, or the stock in the South Sea Islands company is going up and up. It goes up, and then there's a first sell-off. This is what's referred to as a bear trap, right? Where everybody thinks, okay, that's it, it's gonna fall apart right now. No, then it gets going again, and then it gets some media attention, and then it starts picking up some public enthusiasm, and then the greed kicks in, and everybody jumps in and says, this is it, this is the market, this is gonna make us rich. And then you get it to delusion and the new paradigm. That's the point at which, and we saw this in 2000, where everybody was saying, oh yeah, the reason why the market is so explosively high compared to just 5-6 years ago is because of the new paradigm, the digital era, right? It's all the digital era. Or in 2008, it's the new paradigm. It's everybody in America can own a home. And so it's like a rationale for why it's just so good. And then, of course, it crashes just a little bit. And a lot of people deny that it's going to, oh, don't worry, everything's going to be fine. There's this thing called the bull trap, which is the people who think it's going to keep going up forever. They stay in the market. And then the market bumps up just a little bit, and then it just crashes. And as it crashes, it goes through fear, capitulation, despair, and then eventually returns to the mean, to the average increase. Well, it's not only how markets work, it's also how technologies work. And particularly, major technologies on which everything else turns. I mean, you could, I think, build a similar graph around digital technology. You could build a similar graph around the internet. But in the case of this particular article, The Dying Fossil Fuel Industry by Gaius Publius over at downwithtyranny.blogspot.com, he's applying it to the oil industry, to the fossil fuel industry. And this is, in my mind, particularly fascinating. He says that the industry itself has two diseases. The first is its vulnerability to climate change. Because one of two things is going to happen, right? Either we're going to do nothing or not enough, and climate change is going to absolutely bite us in the butt to the point that civilization could break down. And it's already happening, by the way, in the Middle East as a result of climate change. This is already happening. But the chaotic climate response scenario he talks about. And he says a chaotic multi-decade transition from where we are now to that point, this, of chaos. And he says, no, multi-decade, not multi-century, will be the stuff of dystopian nightmares. That transition will be global in scope, obvious as to its cause, and will play out monstrously in full view of anyone who lives into the 2030s. So he's predicting that this is going to start, in roughly 13 years. I completely agree with that analysis. In fact, I think it's already started. He says that may not be too many years away. In fact, the transition has already started in the Middle East and Europe. Or, number two, the voluntary climate response scenario, which is where humanity goes, whoa, look at the direction we're going. We got to do something about this. And that kills off the fossil fuel industry. Either one of these things will kill the fossil fuel industry. And then disease two, vulnerability to its own internal instability. He says its dominant market position is extremely unstable because its profitability depends entirely on massive capital infusions, money, via subsidies, and on a compliant political atmosphere and compliant politicians to keep it afloat. What's more, Gaius Publius writes, the industry sits on a mountain of debt that can never be repaid, will never be repaid, and is poised between two bad pricing decisions. And this is where the fossil fuel industry really is between a rock and a hard place. If they keep prices low, then they can't pay back their debts. It accelerates the bankruptcies in the industry. If the price of fuel, of oil, was to drop from 50, right now it's around $50 a barrel. If it was drop down to $25 a barrel, it would put out of business hundreds of small oil companies. On the other hand, if they raise prices, if it went up to $100 a barrel, which is where it was 10 years ago, if it went up to $100 a barrel, then all of a sudden, pretty much all of the alternative technologies become massively, irrefutably cheaper than fossil fuels. And at that point, everybody moves to solar and wind as fast as they can, which, by the way, is happening. And it's happening most rapidly right now in India and China, which just 3 years ago, everybody was saying, oh, India and China are going to screw all this thing. Well, why should we do anything in the United States? India and China aren't doing anything. Well, actually, they are. They're both actually going to be beating the Paris 2016 commitments that they made. He adds, he quotes Michael Bradshaw, professor of global energy at the Warwick Business School. He says that solar voltaics right now, can generate more energy than oil for every unit of energy invested. Now, in Last Hours of Ancient Sunlight, I presented this problem of, we're building photovoltaic cells, but we're having to use oil to do it. And I did not anticipate back in 1996 that the day would come when photovoltaic cells would generate enough electricity at a low enough price to be able to produce the kind of blast furnace heat necessary for making glass, for making photovoltaic cells. But they can do it now. And he writes, it's only the political grip of the kings of that industry, the Rex Tillersons and the David Kochs, that keep it viable. The industry's long-term debts now total over $2 trillion, the report concludes, half of which will never be repaid, because the issuing firms comprehend neither how dramatically their industry has changed, nor how these changes threaten to soon engulf them. And he says, collapses often happen quickly, and when they do, they don't give much warning. The price floor simply gives way. So look out below. And I find that absolutely fascinating, that the fossil fuel industry is in its dying phase right now.